Welcome to Six Count. I'm your host, Sarah Wild, bringing you the voices and stories of jazz from Durham, North Carolina. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining Six Count, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Zara.
So you moved back to the Triangle from California last February, about a year ago, after 20 years on the West Coast with a dozen years in the Bay Area alone. How have you been settling into the area?
Well, actually, I've really been enjoying it. I'm pleasantly surprised by an amazing music scene here. I actually moved here to be closer to family for one reason, and not for specific music reasons, which was hard for me because I've spent the last 20 years building up an audience and different bands and a whole network, beautiful community in California. So that was really hard to leave. And actually, I was back and forth all year. I had a gig in March with Taylor Eichste in San Jose, and then I had Yoshi's and some other gigs that I had in Oakland this last fall. So I've been slowly cutting the cord and keeping my connection going back and forth, but I'm hoping to settle a little bit more now that I've made some connections here and know some musicians.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but of course that makes sense where you are building relationships with venues and musicians and all the studios that you might record in. So that must have definitely had its challenges. But did you know that there is a vibrant jazz scene here? And was that part of the reason why you moved?
Not really. I didn't know. So I've been pleasantly surprised. And one of the first musicians I realized was here when I moved was a friend of mine from college, from Indiana University, where I went to school.
Is this Rahsaan Barber?
Rahsaan Barber, yeah. And so he introduced me to a lot of other people. So it actually moved along really quickly.
That must have been great to realize that an old friend was here. And I understand you two studied together under David Baker, a renowned jazz trombonist and celloist who founded the Jazz Studies program at Indiana University. Can you share just a little bit about him? He unfortunately passed in 2016, but what a legacy that he left on the Jacobs School of Music.
Yeah, he is an amazing teacher, was an amazing teacher, continues to be through all his books, and all the students who have taken his knowledge and just ran with it. So, you know, he's developed, he was the one who really came up with the idea of having jazz in universities. Before that, it didn't exist in the university. So he fought and made it happen at Indiana University.
Which then must have had this tremendous ripple effect in starting jazz being, or institutions being a pipeline for jazz musicians now.
Exactly. So it was really a true joy to study with him. I actually went to Indiana University as a classical flutist. I was accepted to the classical program.
Oh, interesting.
But I had grown up in Charlotte kind of having two different musical lives, one in the Charlotte Youth Symphony, being a classical flutist, and then I actually grew up in this really diverse church where I learned to play music by ear.
Wow.
This great pianist, Thomas Moore, was playing piano there. There was a choir, and there was nothing written down. And so I learned all the melodies by ear. And then later, I asked, I couldn't remember how I started improvising. So I went back and I asked him, did you tell me to do that? I don't even remember how I started. And he said, no, I just suggested it musically and you picked it up and went with it.
Very cool.
So when I went to Indiana, I was immediately attracted to the jazz department. I started going to all the concerts. I went to every class. I took every class. And then David Baker actually created a major for me. He created a jazz flute major. And I was the first one who received that. With like a separate degree in Spanish as well. So I had a rich time there in Indiana, and I'm friends with a lot of people that I went to school with still.
Well, I'm sure you've made Indiana University proud as the inaugural alumna from the Jazz Flautist program. So neat to hear about that. And I'd also like to ask about your Durham debut, in which Rahsaan played with you on November 19th at the Sharp 9 Gallery. And this venue is sort of a nexus for jazz in the area. So tell us about the show.
That was a really special show. It actually sold out, which was great.
Yeah.
As the first concert that I've produced here. And I played with Rahsaan, and then he introduced me at UNC Chapel Hill during some salsa event to a bunch of musicians. And I met Dr. Steve Anderson, who's the great pianist and head of the jazz department there at UNC Chapel Hill. So I invited him to play at Sharp 9. And then I also wanted to play with somebody that I'd played with before. So
for just the comfort level type of thing?
Yeah, and also to bring it together and connect kind of my past life with my new life. So I actually flew Sylvia Cuenca out here she's back and forth between San Jose and New York. Fortunately, she was in New York. So I brought her and a wonderful bass player that I've also played with in California, Essia Essiet. So the two of them came from New York and joined Steve and Rahsaan and I had another friend, Aaron Sanchez Guerra, who also joined us on congas.
That sounded like such a special evening. I wish I was able to be there, but I'm grateful for the times I've been able to see you perform since. And as you look back on your first year here, I'm interested to know what other collaborations have stood out to you, and what are your impressions of the Triangle jazz scene overall so far?
Well, as I said, I'm pleasantly surprised by the quality of musicians here. I had the great fortune to meet Al Strong, and he's hired me for several gigs now, especially a very memorable one on the roof of the Durham Hotel.
I bet that was beautiful.
It was beautiful. And several other ones. He's hired me to sub for him at Alley 26, and he actually booked this BU gig that we'll be doing on Saturday. So that's been a great joy.
And you played at Sea Grace too, I think, before it closed.
Yeah, with Al. He invited me to sit in. So that was I'm glad I got to see that venue, and I'm sad that it closed.
Yes, I mean, hopefully it comes back in some iteration, because it was so essential to the scene here. But Al is such a great connector, it seems, and just finding opportunities for musicians, as he also is a very busy musician himself.
Yeah. And I also got to meet Keith Gantz, great guitarist, and also Kate McGarry I've met before. We played a gig in San Diego years ago, and I've gotten to reconnect with her here, which is wonderful. And I also was adopted by a group called Tambeng.
Oh, wonderful.
I went to the Cave one night in Chapel Hill and sat in at a jam session, and the bass player and Aaron invited me to just sit in on one of their gigs. And after that, they hired me for all the upcoming gigs. So now I'm in the band.
It should always work that way, right?
Yes, wonderful. Something similar happened to me in Charlotte. I got to be careful and not join too many bands at once. But since I'm just getting my momentum here, it's good. I went to Charlotte and sat in, or actually was hired to play a all-women kind of R&B funk band night. And from a friend who remembered me from when I always came back for Christmas, there was this great venue in Charlotte called the Double Door. And every Monday night there was this amazing band. And I loved it. I revolved all my trips around making sure that I had a Monday night, and I would always go sit in. These people were playing together for 30 or 35 years every Monday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was incredible. And a lot of the same songs, actually, but so good. Soul and R&B. Anyway, the singer remembered me, and she hired me for that gig, and now she invited me to be part of a new band called Dance Card that's going to be starting out of Charlotte. So that's exciting too.
Well, it sounds like the word is getting out. So if you're a jazz musician listening and wants to collaborate with Rebecca, it sounds like you'll need to ask soon. But very good problem to have. And this might be not a fair question, so stop me if it's not. Okay. But I am curious about your observations of our Latin jazz scene, since that's a passion of yours. Acknowledging that Latin jazz is a very expansive term, it includes a diverse array of genres. But just from coming from the West Coast and now being in Durham, what are some big differences that have jumped out to you, or similarities in how it's expressed at the local level?
That's a great question. It is a little unfair because I'm more familiar still with the scene in California, where I've come from. But I am loving the musicians that I've met here. I got to meet, of course, Dr. Steven Anderson and hear his Dominican jazz project. That's incredible. I met Juan Almo, and also Brevin Hampton plays congas. He's going to play with us on Saturday at BU. And I've collected a few great recordings already of musicians in the area who play salsa and different types of Latin jazz. So I'm just exploring and really enjoying what I'm hearing. And that said, also the scene for this kind of music is, as you said, it's very broad, but it's very well represented in the Bay Area and Oakland and San Francisco. There is a really rich scene, people like John Santos and amazing musicians. I could go on, but it is hard to compare because there's a huge scene there. And also the Brazilian music scene in the Bay Area is incredible. There's everything from choro to forró. I was in a forró band for years. And people are always showing up and dancing. I loved it. Oh. And recently played at the Forró Fest USA in Boston, actually a couple months ago.
Nice.
And there's also Brazilian jazz. A lot of that richness of the Brazilian scene in California is thanks to a program that happens every summer called the California Brazil Camp. And they bring amazing Brazilian artists. And that's really fostered a big scene and love for music in that area. So it's rich. Dance too. You would love it because there's this great cultural center called Brazarte.
Okay.
And they have great dance classes and nights, and everybody's at a very high level. It's amazing.
Well, it was bachata that initially got me interested in partner dancing, and it was in Paris by the river, and every night they had a different style of dance in each of the different squares. And I just remember seeing a couple dancing so beautifully, and I talked to her later and she said she had taken the train for a few hours to get there just for that night, and then she comes to work really tired, but was so happy to be able to be dancing all night. So
devotion.
Yes. And you mentioned choro music, and you shared a little bit when we were chatting before recording about the group you've gotten together with 6 members. I'd love to hear more about that. And what initially got you inspired in that genre?
I also was inspired by something that happened at Indiana University. I was in this Latin American music ensemble, and don't try to make an acronym.
Universities are the best at acronyms, or worst, however you look at it.
But it was a good ensemble. It was great. And there was a doctoral student, Marcos Cavalcante, who brought some choros to the group. And I just loved it. They're so fun to play on the flute. There's this connection of harmony of European music from, say, the Chopin era and African rhythms. And they actually came together in a very similar way to the influences that came together and created ragtime in New Orleans. So I think of it kind of as a cousin of ragtime, because it evolved right about the same time. In the 1890s, there were the first choros, official choros being written, and it's actually the first national music of Brazil. Before samba. Wow. The samba evolved out of it. So it's just a gorgeous music. And the difference, I think, though, between ragtime and shodo is, I mean, I could be wrong, but when I hear ragtime, it sounds more of like a historic music, you know, something from the past. It makes me think of the past. But shodo also makes me think of the past because of all the amazing lineage. But it's a living, breathing genre. There are young people learning shodo and becoming virtuosos at this music, memorizing hundreds, thousands of of these long melodies. Usually in a shodo, there's 3 sections, and usually each of those sections will be 32 bars, and it's usually all 16th notes. So it's not, for anybody who's listening who's a musician, it's not just like a short melody. No, people are memorizing tons of these and showing up and playing them. It's beautiful. It's a real discipline and great community. So that's an important part of my life that I've developed over the last decades.
And that you're now bringing to Durham.
Yeah, I initiated a shodo group, and we have a name. We're called Noches Carolinas. And so far, we're just in rehearsal mode. We've been rehearsing every week, rotating whose house we meet at, and having a great time. There's a wonderful mandolin player, and she just got a bandoline. Her name's Julia. She just got a bandoline from Brazil that our cavaquinho player brought back from Minas Gerais.
Oh, how special.
And then we have Leandro on the cavaquinho, and then we have Chris on guitar, and then we have 2 percussionists. Israel is the main percussionist. So we're growing little by little, getting our repertoire together, and soon we'll be looking for places to share this music.
We'll have to keep 6 Count updated when you have those first few shows. We'd love to come. And when we last talked in person, you were on the heels of a trip in Brazil, which I understand is something of a second home for you at this point, having been so many times. Tell us about that trip.
Yeah, I think that was my 9th trip to Brazil. Okay. And usually I go for 2 months, but this time I went for 2 weeks. And I just went to this Shodo Jazz Festival in Jericoacoara, which is in the northeast of Brazil in a state called Ceará. And it's actually within a huge sand dune preserve. So it's just rolling sand dunes as far as the eye can see on the coast.
So you should be wearing good sunglasses at all times.
For sure. I left mine there, so I gotta get some new ones.
Your beach trip has some lost sunglasses.
And it's a little fishing village that's inside the sand dune preserve. It was a little fishing village, and now people found out that there's great windsurfing conditions there. So actually somehow connected with Italy. There are a bunch of Italians who love to come and windsurf. And so there's these posadas. Some of them have a little Italian flair. So it's a really sweet little beach town, but there's a vibrant scene there, partly because there's the Shodo Jazz Festival that comes every November, December to the area. And they put a huge stage in the middle of their little plaza. The streets are sand. You're walking around in your flip-flops.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's a beautiful, beautiful scene for music. It's they bring incredible artists. They brought Hermeto Pascoal, who's one of my main heroes, for his 80th birthday a few years back. And this year we had Pedro Martins and Pipoquinha, incredible duo. And actually a friend of mine who lives in that town, his whole family's from there, and he has a musical family. He actually won The Voice in Brazil recently. Giuliano Ediston.
And playing this music.
Playing his own compositions and actually Brazilian jazz and MPB.
That must have been a huge deal for the town. Yeah.
Yeah. So he got to have his own concert at the festival this year, and it was really beautiful. He played with his brother and a percussionist. And then the main show, the closer for the whole festival, was this incredible accordion player and another style that I play, which is called forró. As I mentioned, I had a forró band in San Francisco for years, Dona Francisca. Mestrinho, great accordion player and singer, composer, and he had a special guest who's one of my favorite singers today. Her name's Vanessa Moreno.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a beautiful experience.
And I'd love to hear about the convivencia aspect that you mentioned. That just seemed like a really cool concept when you were talking about the trip, not recording. But can you share what that means and what it was like to experience that this year? Sure.
It literally means cohabitating or living, sharing together life. So it's about a week after that festival, and it's just the artist and then the festival director, the producer, Capucho. He brings in sometimes children to come learn with the artist, and it's a very calm time. It's away from the tourist town. It's just in his land. People are sleeping in hammocks. There's a pool and there's a lake that comes right up to the property, and you can just go out and swim. It's beautiful. So it's a time to just kind of let your system wind down, and it's very unstructured. This time, the first thing we did there was watch the World Cup together.
Nice.
Unfortunately, that game we won. Brazil won, so that was really fun.
Have the good memory before things turned.
I saw the one where we lost too, and people were really impassioned.
Oh, of course.
It was fun to see there, even though we lost. But it would, I can imagine the energy. If they were to win, the streets would be just full of joy.
Oh, yeah.
So the convivencia is on this land, and we're just sharing music together, and we'll stay up every night until sunrise playing music, just nonstop music. So that's that. I needed that. No cars, just food, the lake, musicians, and music. Yeah. That's it.
What a paradise and a fount of inspiration for a musician, and even those who might just be there to listen too. I mean, how wonderful to hear everyone being with each other in a kind of relaxed way.
Yes.
Too. And forró dance, you're also a bit of a dancer too, and a singer. I heard you with Keith, the guitarist you mentioned at Boxyard RTP in Durham this past fall. So when did singing come into the picture for you?
Well, I've always been singing. I sang in choirs as a kid, and actually I sang in a choir in Oakland, a gospel church choir. We sang at the Warriors game several times. I'm still part of that family, of that church, Taylor Memorial. And so I developed my voice some there, and I've taken several lessons, and I actually taught a lot. I've taught a lot in schools. I'm a certified ORF teacher. It's a system foundational program for teaching music to kids. That's based on that's a whole other topic that we could talk about sometime. But it's basically bringing kids into music through play. So playing with elements and making games out of everything so that they naturally want to discover. So anyway, a lot of that is singing. So I've been singing with kids and with a choir, and then I bring it into my gigs, and I love it. I don't identify as much as a singer, so actually sometimes I have even more fun singing because I'm just free and I'm having fun and enjoying it.
Yeah, there's definitely some power in not being limited by all of your different standards that you have for yourself, which can, don't want to speak for you, but for me can be a bit defeating at times if you know, like it has to be here. But if you're trying to still have excellence, but enjoy it for the sake of enjoying, there's something to be said for that too.
Yeah, exactly.
For 4 years, you hosted a jazz jam in San Francisco at a Senegalese venue. And I'm curious if you think you might start something similar to Triangle, although you've already done lots of things here. And so maybe this, the focus will be on the 6-person group that you have going. But what other sorts of projects or collaborations are you hoping to get involved with this year?
That's a great idea, actually. That was a series called Brazil and Beyond that I had in San Francisco. And I would mostly play Brazilian music, but sometimes it would be something totally different. Somebody from Ghana, or it would be some Balkan music, or it would be forró. And so I was changing it up. I got to play with great jazz pianist Mark Levine there a few times, and guitarist I play with a lot, Ian Ficchini. So I just love having a regular gig like that where I get to grow and play, and it's not high pressure. So I love gigs like that. So I will look out for something where I could host. I would love to have a weekly gig with Noches Carolinas. That would be ideal. Someplace where we can just go play every week and develop our group in a restaurant or someplace. So we're looking out for something like that.
During the pandemic, of course, this wasn't the case, but it's encouraging now that we have the Jazz Jam on Mondays in Chapel Hill that you referred to at the Cave. We have on Thursdays in Cary at Bond Brothers East Side. Brio does their residency. And then Tuesdays with Bean Clemens, the drummer, at Kingfisher. So, and I'm sure I'm missing some, and please, if you're listening, share what else is going on so we can share it out. But there's just so much happening on a weekly basis, which to me shows how the scene is thriving.
Yeah, that's great. And that's inspiring me.
And also perhaps not a fair question, but what are you listening right now for inspiration? And are there any old time favorites that you frequently return to for recentering yourself and your music?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I changed it up. I'm listening a lot to Vanessa Moreno, the singer I mentioned before. I love also Monica Salmaso, another great Brazilian singer. Those are singers that I listen to kind of just enjoy music in my day, while I'm doing something else. And then I'm always listening to whatever I'm getting ready for the next gig.
Of course.
So sometimes I like to not listen to music to just clear my mind. But lately I kind of love to always have it on. So Milton Giolanda is a great mandolin player. I love listening to him. A friend of mine, Fabiano Nascimento, his music is really gorgeous. And then I'm listening to music that we're preparing for our gig on Saturday, such as Indestructible.
Indestructible?
Indestructible by Ray Barretto. And a piece by Chano Dominguez that's called Rumba Pajeri. So listening to some Colombian music and the Dominican music that's the roots of what inspires Steve. So I'm trying to get some of those sounds in my ear to get ready for playing with these musicians.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about Saturday's gig at BU Cafe in downtown Durham. Will you share who you're going to be playing with and what people might expect from the show?
Al Strong hired us for the gig, and he's also going to be sitting in on a few pieces. And then I'm playing with Steve Anderson, Dr. Steven Anderson, and then Brevin Hampton, who I mentioned before, a great bass player that Dr. Anderson recommended, Andy Kleindienst, and a wonderful drummer from the band Também that adopted me, Gaston Reggio. He's from Uruguay, a wonderful drummer, and he studied in Brazil for years and actually knows some of the people that I just spent time with in Brazil. One of them was his teacher, Kleber Almeida, and he actually knows a past bandmate of mine too, who I've had a few bands with, a great guitarist. His name's Rafael Amaranchi, that I had a group with.
Oh, very cool.
So there's all these connections that are coming together.
Jazz seems like one big family sometimes, even if you're so far from the West Coast from where you were, and yet people like Rasan and others who have moved to the area hopefully have made it feel less far for you.
Yeah, I definitely feel welcomed by all these wonderful musicians that I've met and ones that I'm realizing are here that I've known from the past.
Well, very cool. Is there anywhere else that you'd like to mention in terms of where people might be able to find you in the coming months? And I also wanted to make sure I ask about teaching. It sounds like you've already partnered with Duke University's dance program. So it sounds like you're also going to be mixing in some teaching in 2023.
Yeah, I have my private studio going. Actually, a lot of my students from California have stayed with me online, which is a real blessing. And when I go back there, I see them in person and create recitals. I have a few local students already accepting more spots if anybody's interested in vocal lessons or flute lessons. And I will be accompanying actually the dance department at Duke University. I've accompanied a little bit so far. So they'll hire me from time to time to accompany dance classes, which is a real, it's a perfect job for me. I love the visuals of just watching dancers. I've worked with a lot of dancers in the past, flamenco dancers and Brazilian dancers as well. And it's one of my favorite things to do, to connect the music with a visual aspect of dance.
And as a dancer, I love being able to hear live music and find the richness there and how that music can inform the movement. So it's cool how that goes both ways, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Rebecca, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. Anything else you'd want to add today?
That's it. I don't have a lot of upcoming gigs. I do have something towards the end of the month with guitarist Ed Stevenson. So you can look up his information to find that. And then I will be putting up my upcoming gigs on my website, which is RebeccaKleinmann.com. It's a little bit of a mess right now. It needs to be reorganized. But if you go to upcoming performances, I'll at least list them for now. And then hopefully we'll be redoing this website pretty soon.
Well, very good. We'll link your website in the episode description. Thank you again, and best of luck on Saturday's show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Six Count. I'm Zara Wild. You can let us know what you thought of the episode or recommend a guest by emailing us at sixcountpodcast@gmail.com or by finding us on Twitter or Instagram at sixcountpodcast. If you'd like to support our work in telling the story of jazz in Durham, you can make a gift to the show by following the link in our episode description. Thanks for listening.